Mary Williams stood in the marble-floored kitchen of their Manhattan penthouse, watching the morning sun cast long shadows across Central Park. The view from the 42nd floor never failed to take her breath away, even after 3 years of marriage to William Harrison, one of New York's most influential tech billionaires. Today felt different, though, special in a way that made her heart flutter with anticipation. "Good morning, beautiful," William's voice carried from behind her as he entered the kitchen, already dressed in his signature charcoal suit. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, and his blue eyes held that familiar warmth that had first captured her attention at a charity gala years ago. "Morning," Mary replied, turning to accept his kiss on her cheek. She inhaled his cologne, expensive and sophisticated, just like everything else in their carefully curated life. "You're up early for a Saturday." "Board meeting at 10, he explained, pouring himself coffee from their top-of-the-line espresso machine. "Henderson Industries merger won't finalize itself." He paused, studying her face. "You seem excited about something. What's got you glowing this morning?" Mary's hand instinctively moved to her still flat stomach. She'd planned this moment for weeks, wanting everything to be perfect when she shared the news that would change their lives forever. The pregnancy test from 3 days ago sat hidden in her jewelry box upstairs, alongside the ultrasound appointment confirmation for next Tuesday. "Just a good feeling about today," she said, unable to suppress her smile. "Maybe we could have dinner at Giovanni's tonight, just the two of us." William's expression shifted slightly, a shadow crossing his features before he recovered. "Actually, I might be tied up late tonight. This merger is more complicated than we anticipated." "Rain check." Disappointment flickered through Mary, but she pushed it aside. William's work demanded everything from him. She'd learned that early in their relationship. His company, Harrison Tech, employed over 15,000 people across 3 continents. The weight of that responsibility was something she'd grown to respect, even when it meant postponed dinners and cancelled weekend plans. "Of course," she said, forcing brightness into her voice. "The baby news can wait another day," she thought to herself. After William left, Mary decided to check on the security system he'd had installed last month. The cameras throughout their penthouse had been malfunctioning for weeks, causing gaps in their home security that made William increasingly paranoid about potential corporate espionage. He'd mentioned the repair team was supposed to fix everything yesterday while they were both out. She made her way to William's home office, a sleek space dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows and cutting-edge technology. The security monitor sat on his mahogany desk, its multiple screens usually showing feeds from various rooms throughout their home. For weeks, most screens had displayed "signal lost" in red letters. Mary pressed the power button, and to her surprise, all 12 screens flickered to life. The repair team had indeed fixed everything. She could see clear feeds from their bedroom, living room, kitchen, and even the guest rooms they rarely used. The timestamp showed the cameras had been recording since yesterday afternoon. Curious about whether the system had captured anything interesting during their absence, Mary clicked on the recorded footage tab. She scrolled through hours of empty rooms until something caught her attention. Movement in their bedroom from yesterday evening, long after they'd supposedly returned home together. Her finger hovered over the play button as confusion washed over her. They'd spent yesterday evening at the Harrison Foundation charity dinner across town. They hadn't returned home until nearly midnight. Yet the timestamp showed activity in their bedroom at 8:47 p.m. Mary clicked play, and her world tilted on its axis. On the screen, she watched William enter their bedroom, not alone, but with a woman she didn't recognize. A young blonde in an elegant black dress, someone who moved with familiar comfort through their most private space. Mary's breath caught in her throat as she watched her husband's hands slide around the woman's waist, pulling her close in an embrace that spoke of intimacy and routine. The woman laughed at something William said, the sound carrying through the speakers with crystal clarity. Mary turned up the volume, her hands trembling as she watched the scene unfold. "The charity dinner was the perfect alibi," William's voice came through clearly. "Mary will never suspect anything. She's too trusting, too focused on playing the perfect wife." The blonde woman, who couldn't be older than 25, smiled up at him. "What about when she finds out about the pregnancy? Won't that complicate things?" Mary's blood turned to ice. How could this stranger know about her pregnancy when she hadn't even told William yet? "She won't find out," William replied, his voice carrying a coldness Mary had never heard before. "Not if everything goes according to plan. The merger with Henderson Industries includes some personal arrangements. Once that's finalized, Mary becomes expendable. The woman laughed again, a sound that now made Mary's skin crawl. You're terrible, William, but I suppose that's why I love you. When do we tell her about us? We don't, William said firmly. After the accident we've planned, there won't be anyone left to tell. Mary's legs gave out and she collapsed into William's leather office chair. The conversation continued on screen, but the words became a blur as the devastating reality crashed over her. Her husband, the man she'd loved and trusted completely, was not only cheating on her but planning her murder. She fumbled for her phone with shaking hands, her mind racing through possibilities. Who could she call? Who would believe her? William's influence extended throughout New York's elite circles. His charitable work and business success had earned him respect and admiration from everyone who mattered. She was just Mary Williams, former marketing coordinator turned wealthy wife. The video continued playing, showing William and his mistress making detailed plans about her demise, discussing it as casually as they might plan a vacation. They mentioned dates, locations, and methods with a chilling precision that made it clear this wasn't a spontaneous decision. This was a carefully orchestrated plot that had been in motion for months. As the footage ended, Mary sat in stunned silence, staring at her reflection in the blank monitor screen. The woman looking back at her was pale, hollow-eyed, and utterly alone. In the span of 20 minutes, her entire world had crumbled. The man she'd planned to surprise with news of their first child was actively planning her death. But as the initial shock began to fade, something else took its place, a cold, calculating anger that surprised her with its intensity. William thought she was naive, trusting, expendable. He'd underestimated the woman he'd married, and that mistake might just be the thing that saved her life. Mary glanced at the clock, 10:30 a.m. William's board meeting would keep him occupied for at least 2 hours. She had time to think, to plan, to decide how to use this devastating knowledge to her advantage. The cameras that were supposed to protect their home had instead revealed the truth that would either destroy her or set her free. She saved the video file to a secure cloud account, then made copies on 3 separate flash drives. Evidence was power, and power was exactly what she needed right now. Mary paced the length of their living room, her bare feet silent against the polished hardwood floors. The pregnancy test she'd retrieved from upstairs sat on the coffee table like an accusation, its 2 pink lines a stark reminder of how completely her life had changed in a single morning. She was carrying the child of a man who was planning to kill her. The irony wasn't lost on her. 3 hours ago, she'd been planning the perfect moment to share the happiest news of their marriage. Now she was calculating whether that same news might accelerate her husband's murderous timeline. She replayed the video conversation in her mind, analyzing every word for clues about their plan. William had mentioned the accident we've planned and referenced the Henderson Industries merger as providing some kind of deadline. The merger was scheduled to finalize next Friday, exactly 1 week away. Did that mean she had 7 days to live? Her phone buzzed with a text from William. "Meeting running long, don't wait up for lunch, love you." The casual normalcy of the message made her stomach churn. How long had he been sending her loving texts while planning her death? How many kisses goodbye had been calculated deceptions? Mary forced herself to think strategically rather than emotionally. She needed allies, but who could she trust? Their social circle consisted primarily of William's business associates and their wives, people whose loyalty would naturally align with New York's tech elite rather than with her. Her own family lived in Oregon, too far away to provide immediate help, and her closest friends had gradually drifted away as her marriage consumed more of her time and attention. The doorman's voice crackled through the intercom, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. "Mrs. Williams, you have a visitor. Detective Sarah Chen from the NYPD. Should I send her up?" Mary's heart nearly stopped. Had William's plan already begun? Was this somehow connected to the accident they'd discussed? "I'll be right down," she managed to say, her voice steadier than she felt. She grabbed her purse and headed for the elevator, her mind racing through possibilities. Maybe someone had seen her accessing the security footage. Maybe William had monitoring software she didn't know about. Maybe this was all part of some elaborate setup. The elevator seemed to take forever to reach the lobby. When the doors finally opened, Mary saw a woman in her mid-30s waiting near the marble reception desk. Detective Chen was shorter than Mary had expected, with sharp eyes and an air of quiet competence that was somehow reassuring. "Mrs. Williams?" Detective Chen approached with her badge extended. "I'm sorry to bother you on a Saturday, but I was hoping we could speak privately about your husband's business associates." Mary's relief was so intense she nearly stumbled. This wasn't about the video or William's plan, at least not directly. Of course, would you like to come upstairs? Actually, I was hoping we could talk somewhere more neutral. There's a coffee shop around the corner, Café Luna. Would that work for you? Something in the detective's tone suggested this wasn't really a request. Mary nodded, and they walked the 2 blocks in relative silence. The October air was crisp, and Mary pulled her cashmere coat tighter around herself as they entered the small, crowded cafe. They found a corner table away from the other patrons. Detective Chen ordered black coffee, while Mary opted for herbal tea, her stomach too unsettled for caffeine. "I'll be direct, Mrs. Williams," Detective Chen began once they were seated. "We're investigating potential financial irregularities in several of your husband's business dealings. Nothing that directly implicates him, but some of his associates have raised red flags in our white-collar crime division." Mary struggled to process this information alongside everything else she'd learned that morning. What kind of irregularities? Money laundering, primarily, possibly some offshore tax evasion. The Henderson Industries merger has caught our attention because of some unusual financial movements in the weeks leading up to it. Detective Chen studied Mary's face carefully. "I was hoping you might have noticed anything unusual about your husband's behavior lately. Changes in routine, new associates, unexplained stress." The question hung in the air like a lifeline Mary wasn't sure she should grab. This detective was investigating William independently of anything Mary had discovered. That meant she might have an ally, or at least someone who wouldn't automatically dismiss her concerns as the paranoid fantasies of a jealous wife. "There have been some changes," Mary said carefully. "He's been working later hours, more weekend meetings. He seemed different, more secretive." Detective Chen nodded, making notes in a small notebook. "Has he mentioned anyone named Vincent Moreau? French businessman, works in international finance." The name was unfamiliar, but Mary shook her head. "I don't think so. William doesn't usually discuss his business associates with me." "What about Elena Vasquez? About 25, blonde, works in what we believe is a consulting capacity for several of William's ventures." Mary's blood turned cold. The woman from the video had been blonde and appeared to be in her mid-20s. I might have seen her. At company events, maybe." Detective Chen's eyes sharpened. "Recently?" Mary made a decision that would change everything. "Detective Chen, if I told you I had evidence of something serious, something that might be connected to your investigation, would you believe me, even if it seemed impossible?" The detective leaned forward, her full attention focused on Mary. "What kind of evidence?" "Video evidence. Of my husband and Elena Vasquez planning something that I think they're going to hurt me." The words hung between them like a confession. Detective Chen's expression didn't change, but Mary could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. "Mrs. Williams, are you telling me you believe your husband is planning to harm you?" "I'm telling you I have a video of him discussing my death as if it's already been decided. They called it the accident we've planned." Mary's voice was barely above a whisper, but each word felt like breaking through a wall she'd been too afraid to acknowledge. Detective Chen closed her notebook and leaned back in her chair. "I think we need to have a much longer conversation, and not in a public place. Do you have somewhere safe you can stay tonight? Somewhere your husband wouldn't think to look for you?" The question made everything real in a way that Mary hadn't been prepared for. She was no longer Mary Williams, beloved wife of a successful businessman. She was a woman whose life was in danger, who needed protection from the man who'd promised to love and cherish her. "I don't know," she admitted. "I don't know who I can trust anymore." Detective Chen reached across the table and placed her hand over Mary's. "You can trust me, and right now that might be enough to keep you alive long enough to figure out the rest." As they left the cafe together, Mary felt the first spark of hope she'd experienced since watching that devastating video. She wasn't alone anymore. Someone believed her. Someone with the authority and resources to help her fight back against William's plan. But she also knew that involving Detective Chen meant there was no going back to the life she'd known. Whether she survived the next week or not, Mary Williams as she'd existed that morning was gone forever. The question now was who she would become in her place. Detective Chen's unmarked sedan pulled into the parking garage of a modest hotel in Queens, far from the gleaming towers of Manhattan where Mary's life had unraveled. The Comfort Inn wasn't the kind of place anyone would expect to find the wife of a billionaire, which made it perfect for their purposes. "Room 247, Detective Chen said, handing Mary a key card. "It's registered under my name. Nobody knows you're here except me." Mary clutched her overnight bag, hastily packed while Detective Chen waited in the lobby of her building, and followed the detective up 2 flights of stairs. The hotel was clean but unremarkable, a world away from the luxury she'd grown accustomed to over the past 3 years. The room was small but adequate, with 2 beds and a view of the Queens Boulevard traffic. Detective Chen immediately closed the curtains and activated the chain lock. "Before we go any further," Detective Chen said, settling into the room's single chair, "I need to see this video you mentioned." Mary retrieved her laptop from her bag, grateful she'd thought to bring it during their hurried exit from the penthouse. Her hands shook slightly as she navigated to the cloud storage account where she'd saved the security footage. "This was recorded yesterday evening," she explained, turning the screen toward Detective Chen. "The timestamp shows 8:47 p.m., but William and I were at a charity dinner across town at that time. At least I thought we were together the entire evening." As the video played, Mary watched Detective Chen's expression shift from professional skepticism to grim concern. The audio was crystal clear, William's voice unmistakable as he discussed Mary's planned accident with casual indifference. When Elena Vasquez mentioned Mary's pregnancy, Detective Chen paused the video. "You're pregnant?" "I found out 3 days ago. I hadn't told anyone yet. I was planning to surprise William today." Mary's laugh was bitter. "Instead, I discovered that his mistress somehow knows before he does." Detective Chen resumed the video, taking detailed notes as William and Elena discussed timing, methods, and the connection to the Henderson Industries merger. When it ended, she sat in silence for several long moments. "This changes everything," Detective Chen finally said. "What we thought was a white-collar investigation just became potential conspiracy to commit murder." Mary felt a cold relief at hearing someone else confirm what she'd witnessed. "So you believe me?" "The evidence speaks for itself. But Mrs. Williams, Mary, I need you to understand how dangerous this situation has become. If William and his associates are willing to kill you to protect their financial interests, they won't hesitate to escalate if they discover you know about their plan." The detective's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "I need to take this. It's my partner." Mary listened to one side of a tense conversation about surveillance reports and financial transactions. When Detective Chen hung up, her expression was troubled. "There's been a development," she said. "William just transferred $5 million to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The transfer was completed 20 minutes ago." Mary's stomach dropped. "That's not normal for him. William keeps most of his assets in domestic accounts for tax purposes. He's always been paranoid about offshore banking. It gets worse. The account belongs to a company called Meridian Consulting, which our financial crimes unit has been tracking for months. They specialize in what they call problem resolution for wealthy clients." The implications hit Mary like a physical blow. "He's paying someone to kill me." "It looks that way. The $5 million suggests they're planning something sophisticated, not a simple mugging or car accident. This level of payment indicates professional involvement." Mary sank onto one of the beds, overwhelmed by the escalating nightmare her life had become. This morning she'd been a happily married woman planning to share wonderful news with her husband. Now she was hiding in a Queens hotel while he arranged her murder. "What do we do now?" she asked. Detective Chen was already on her phone again, this time calling what sounded like a federal contact. Mary caught fragments of the conversation, mentions of interstate commerce, federal jurisdiction, and requests for protective custody. "We're bringing in the FBI," Detective Chen explained after ending the call. "A domestic homicide case becomes federal when it involves the kind of financial instruments and offshore accounts your husband is using. Agent Martinez will be here within the hour." The next hour felt like the longest of Mary's life. She tried calling her sister in Portland, but hung up before the call connected. How could she explain this situation without sounding completely insane? Instead, she focused on documenting everything she could remember about William's recent behavior, the late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way he'd grown distant over the past few months. Agent Martinez arrived precisely on time, a tall woman in her 40s with graying hair and eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail of their hotel room. She reviewed the video evidence with the same methodical attention Detective Chen had shown, but her questions were more pointed. "Mrs. Williams, I need to ask you something that might be difficult to hear," Agent Martinez said after finishing her review. "Is it possible your husband has been planning this for longer than the past few weeks?" The question caught Mary off guard. "What do you mean?" "The sophistication of this plan, the financial arrangements, the coordination with multiple parties. This suggests months of preparation, possibly longer. I need you to think back over your marriage. Were there any signs that William might have been evaluating you as a liability rather than a partner? Mary's mind raced through memories she'd previously interpreted as signs of a caring husband. William's insistence on updating their life insurance policies last year, his suggestion that she quit her marketing job to focus on being the perfect wife, the way he'd gradually isolated her from her friends and family, always with reasonable explanations about their busy social calendar or the demands of his business. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He's been planning this since we got married, hasn't he?" Agent Martinez's expression was sympathetic but firm. "It's a possibility we have to consider. The financial evidence suggests William has been moving assets and establishing offshore accounts for at least 18 months. That timeline coincides with several changes in his business structure that would benefit from a change in his personal circumstances." The room felt like it was spinning around Mary. Her entire marriage had been a lie, not just unfaithful, but actively predatory. William hadn't fallen out of love with her. He'd never loved her at all. She'd been a convenience that had outlived its usefulness. "But why now?" she asked. "What changed?" "The Henderson Industries merger," Detective Chen interjected. "If William is involved in money laundering or other financial crimes, a divorce would require financial disclosure that might expose his illegal activities. But if you died in an accident, he inherits everything, and there's no legal scrutiny of his assets," Mary finished. The cold logic of it made her feel sick. Agent Martinez leaned forward, her tone becoming more urgent. "Mary, I need you to understand that we're not just protecting you from a murder plot anymore. Based on the financial evidence we've uncovered, William's criminal enterprise likely involves millions of dollars and multiple international partners. These people don't leave loose ends. What does that mean for me? It means that even if we arrest William tomorrow, you might still be in danger from his associates. This video evidence makes you the key witness in what could become one of the largest white-collar crime cases in New York history." Mary felt the walls of her new reality closing in around her. She wasn't just a victim, she was evidence. Her survival wasn't just about escaping William's immediate plans. It was about staying alive long enough to testify against an entire criminal network. "So what happens now?" she asked. Agent Martinez and Detective Chen exchanged glances before the FBI agent answered. "Now we turn you from a victim into bait. We're going to help you go home and pretend nothing has changed while we build a case that will put your husband and his associates away for life." The plan they outlined was terrifying in its simplicity. Mary would return to her normal routine, act like the loving wife William expected her to be, and wait for him to make his move. Meanwhile, federal agents would monitor every aspect of the investigation, ready to intervene when William's plan reached its final stage. "You're asking me to go back to a man who wants me dead and pretend everything is normal," Mary said. "We're asking you to be brave for just a little while longer," Agent Martinez replied, "because right now you're the only person who can stop William from destroying other lives after he destroys yours." As Mary packed her overnight bag to return to Manhattan, she realized she was no longer the same woman who'd left that morning. Fear had transformed into determination, shock into resolve. William thought he was hunting prey, but he was about to discover he'd been living with a predator all along. Mary stood outside the door of her own penthouse, key in hand, preparing for what might be the most important performance of her life. It was nearly 8 p.m., and William would be expecting his loving wife to greet him with dinner and conversation about their respective days. Instead, she was about to sit across from him, knowing he'd paid $5 million to have her killed. The FBI wire taped to her ribs felt bulky and obvious, though Agent Martinez had assured her it was virtually undetectable. Detective Chen's voice crackled softly through the nearly invisible earpiece. "Remember, act natural. We're monitoring everything." Mary opened the door to find William in the kitchen, standing exactly where she'd been that morning when her world had collapsed. He was opening a bottle of wine, their anniversary vintage from Napa Valley, and he smiled when he saw her. "There's my beautiful wife," he said, approaching for their usual greeting kiss. Mary forced herself not to flinch as his lips touched hers, tasting the metallic flavor of deception. "How was your day?" "Quiet," Mary replied, setting down her purse with calculated casualness. "I did some shopping, had lunch with Sarah." The lie came easily. Detective Chen had coached her on creating a simple, verifiable story that wouldn't arouse suspicion. "Sarah Chen?" William asked, and Mary's blood chilled. Had she made a mistake? but his tone remained conversational. "I don't think I know her. New friend?" "College friend," Mary improvised. "She's visiting from Chicago." She moved to the wine rack, grateful for a reason to turn away from William's scrutinizing gaze. "How was the board meeting?" "Productive. Very productive." William's voice carried a satisfaction that made Mary's skin crawl. "The Henderson merger is moving forward ahead of schedule. Everything should be finalized by Wednesday instead of Friday." Mary's hand tightened on the wine bottle she was holding. Wednesday was 4 days away. Had William moved up his timeline as well? Through her earpiece, she heard Detective Chen's voice. "Stay calm, get him talking about his plans." "That's wonderful, honey," Mary said, forcing enthusiasm into her voice. "You've worked so hard on this deal. We should celebrate." William moved behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders in what should have been a loving gesture. Instead, Mary felt like prey being measured by a predator. "Actually, I was thinking we could take a long weekend after everything's settled," William said. "Maybe drive up to the house in the Hamptons, just the two of us away from all the city stress." The Hamptons house was isolated, surrounded by acres of private beach and woodlands. Mary realized with crystal clarity that this was where William planned for her accident to occur. Away from witnesses, away from security cameras, away from anyone who might ask inconvenient questions. "That sounds perfect," she lied, turning in his arms to smile up at him. "I love it when it's just us." William's smile in return was the same one that had charmed her at charity galas and business dinners. But now Mary could see the calculation behind it. How had she missed the coldness in his eyes? "Speaking of just us," William continued, "I think we should probably discuss our future, our real future." Mary's heart began pounding, but she kept her expression interested and loving. "What do you mean?" "Well, with the merger complete, Harrison Tech is going to be valued at over $2 billion. That changes things for us. Security concerns, public scrutiny, the works. We might need to make some lifestyle adjustments." Through her earpiece, Detective Chen's voice was urgent. "He's setting up the narrative. Keep him talking about specifics." "What kind of adjustments?" Mary asked, settling onto the leather sofa in their living room. William joined her, his arm draping around her shoulders in a gesture that now felt like a trap. "More security, for one thing. I've been getting some threats related to the merger. Nothing serious, but enough to make me cautious about our safety." William's tone was perfectly calibrated, concerned but not alarming, protective but not paranoid. "I think it might be wise for you to have a bodyguard, at least temporarily." Mary realized she was witnessing William construct the cover story for her murder. The threats would provide motive for why someone might want to harm her. The bodyguard would either be complicit in the plan or would be eliminated as well to remove witnesses. "Threats?" Mary asked, injecting just the right amount of worry into her voice. "What kind of threats?" "Business rivals who want to disrupt the merger. They know the best way to hurt me is to target what I love most." William's hand stroked her hair with practiced tenderness. "I won't let anything happen to you, Mary, I promise." The sincerity in his voice was perfect. If Mary hadn't seen the video of him planning her death, she would have been completely convinced by his performance. She was married to a sociopath who could lie with the emotional authenticity of a loving husband. "I trust you completely," Mary said, the words like acid in her throat. "You've always protected me." William's smile was radiant, "And I always will. In fact, I've already arranged for additional security at the Hamptons house. We'll be completely safe there." Mary nodded, playing the role of the trusting wife while her mind raced. William was accelerating his timeline, the merger closing Wednesday, the trip to the Hamptons immediately afterward. That gave the FBI only 3 days to build their case and prepare for whatever William had planned. Her phone buzzed with a text message. William glanced at the screen and frowned. "Who's texting you this late?" Mary looked at the message. It was from Detective Chen, but sent from a number that would appear as Sarah Chen in Mary's contacts. The message read, "Had such a great time at lunch. Let's do dinner soon." "It's Sarah," Mary said casually. "She wants to have dinner while she's in town." "This week might not be good," William said, his tone remaining light, but with an edge Mary had learned to recognize. "With everything happening at work, I'd prefer if you kept your social calendar clear. We need to focus on our security right now." Mary nodded understandingly, but she felt the cage closing around her. William was isolating her, cutting off her connections to the outside world in preparation for whatever he had planned. In his mind, Mary Williams was already dead. He was just managing the practical details of making it happen. "Of course," she agreed. "Sarah will understand. Our safety comes first." William pulled her closer, and Mary had to fight every instinct that screamed at her to run. Instead, she nestled against his chest, playing the part of the devoted wife while listening to the heartbeat of the man who was planning to kill her. "I love you, Mary," William whispered into her hair. "More than you'll ever know." "I love you too," Mary whispered back, the lie burning her throat like poison. As they sat together in what had once been their sanctuary, Mary realized she had learned something crucial about survival. Sometimes the most dangerous place to be was in the arms of someone who claimed to love you, but she had also learned something about her own strength. She was capable of deception that matched William's own. The hunted had become the hunter, and William had no idea his perfect victim was about to become his perfect downfall. Through her earpiece, Detective Chen's voice provided the reassurance Mary needed. "You're doing great. We have everything we need. Just hold on a little longer." Mary closed her eyes and held on, counting down the hours until she could stop pretending to love the man who was planning her murder. Tuesday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth for October, and Mary found herself grateful for the sunshine streaming through their bedroom windows as she watched William prepare for another day of orchestrating her death. He hummed while shaving, actually hummed as if planning a murder put him in particularly good spirits. "Big day today?" Mary asked from the bed, maintaining the facade of sleepy domesticity that had become her survival strategy. "Very big," William replied, meeting her eyes in the bathroom mirror. "Final signatures on the Henderson deal, plus I'm meeting with our new security consultant about the Hamptons arrangements." Mary's blood chilled. The security consultant was undoubtedly connected to Meridian Consulting and the $5 million transfer. William was meeting with her killer, discussing her death as casually as he might plan a business lunch. Through her nearly invisible earpiece, Agent Martinez's voice crackled softly. "We have surveillance on all his meetings today. Stay strong." "Will you be home for dinner?" Mary asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "Late meeting tonight, I'm afraid. Don't wait up." William emerged from the bathroom, adjusting his tie with the same meticulous care he applied to everything in his life. "But tomorrow we can drive up to the Hamptons early. Make a real weekend of it." Mary nodded, forcing a smile. Tomorrow, Wednesday, would be the day William planned to kill her. The merger would be complete, his assets protected, and his wife would meet with an unfortunate accident in their isolated beach house. After William left, Mary had exactly 3 hours before her own crucial appointment, the ultrasound she'd scheduled to confirm her pregnancy. Agent Martinez had insisted she keep the appointment, both to maintain normalcy and because the pregnancy added another layer of legal consequences to William's planned crime. Detective Chen met her in the waiting room of Dr. Patricia Huang's Manhattan office, posing as Mary's sister visiting from out of town. The ruse felt absurd given the circumstances, but maintaining Mary's regular routine was essential to the FBI's case. "Mrs. Williams?" Dr. Huang appeared in the doorway, a warm woman in her 50s who had been Mary's gynecologist for 2 years. "Ready to see your baby?" The ultrasound took 20 minutes, during which Mary stared at the grainy black and white image of her child, William's child, and tried to process the surreal reality of her situation. She was carrying the baby of a man who was planning to kill them both. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Huang announced, printing several copies of the ultrasound images. "You're about 6 weeks along, which puts your due date in early June. Have you told your husband yet?" "I'm planning to surprise him," Mary said, which was technically true. William would certainly be surprised when this pregnancy became evidence in his murder trial. As they left the medical building, Detective Chen's phone rang. The conversation was brief but intense, full of law enforcement jargon that Mary was beginning to understand all too well. "Vincent Moreau flew into JFK this morning," Detective Chen explained as they walked toward her unmarked car. "He's the French financier we've been tracking in connection with Meridian Consulting. His presence in New York confirms that William's plan is moving into its final phase." Mary's legs felt unsteady. "How final?" "We intercepted communications indicating that the Hampton solution is scheduled for tomorrow evening. Moreau's job is to make it look like a robbery gone wrong, wealthy couple surprised by intruders at their isolated beach house." The clinical way Detective Chen described her planned murder made Mary feel dizzy. "So we stop him now, right? Arrest William before—" "We can't," Detective Chen interrupted. "Not yet. We need them to take concrete steps toward the actual crime before we can make arrests that will stick. Conspiracy charges are harder to prove than attempted murder." Mary stopped walking, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "You're using me as bait. You're actually going to let me go to the Hamptons with him tomorrow." "You'll be protected every second," Detective Chen assured her. "We'll have agents in place before you even arrive. But Mary, this is our only chance to catch not just William, but the entire network he's working with. Moreau, Elena Vasquez, the offshore financial operation, all of it." They reached Detective Chen's car, but Mary remained on the sidewalk. "What if something goes wrong? What if your agents are too far away when—" "Nothing will go wrong," Agent Martinez's voice came through Mary's earpiece. "But you need to understand that if we don't stop this network now, other people will die. William isn't the only wealthy client using Meridian Consulting Services." The weight of responsibility settled on Mary's shoulders. She wasn't just fighting for her own life anymore. She was potentially saving the lives of other victims. The thought of other women like herself trusting their husbands while those same men planned their murders made Mary's decision for her. "What do I need to do?" Detective Chen smiled grimly. "Go home and pack for a romantic weekend with your husband, but pack smart. Include the ultrasound photos where William will find them. When he discovers your pregnancy, it might accelerate his timeline and force him to make mistakes." The rest of Tuesday passed in a haze of preparation and mounting terror. Mary packed their usual Hamptons weekend bag, but now every item felt loaded with significance. The sundress William liked became potential evidence. The book she'd planned to read by the beach became a prop in the performance of her lifetime. That evening, William returned home earlier than expected, his mood ebullient in a way that made Mary's skin crawl. "Change of plans," he announced, sweeping Mary into an embrace that felt like a predator claiming its prey. "We're leaving for the Hamptons tonight instead of tomorrow morning. I want to watch the sunrise with my beautiful wife." Mary's heart hammered against her ribs. The timeline had moved up again. Through her earpiece, she heard Agent Martinez's voice. "We're ready. FBI units are already in position around the Hamptons house. Tonight." Mary managed to sound surprised rather than terrified. "But I haven't finished packing." "We don't need much," William said, his hands stroking her hair in a gesture that now felt sinister. "Just a quiet night together, away from all the stress of the city." As William loaded their bags into his Mercedes, Mary caught sight of a second car in their building's garage, a black sedan with Vincent Moreau behind the wheel. Their eyes met briefly, and Mary saw her own death reflected in the French businessman's cold smile. The drive to the Hamptons took 2 hours, during which William maintained a stream of loving conversation about their future together. He talked about travel plans they would never take, renovations to houses they would never complete, and children they would never have, all while driving Mary to the location where he planned to end her life. "Look at that sunset," William said as they pulled into the circular driveway of their Hamptons house. The Victorian mansion sat on 5 acres of private beach, surrounded by carefully maintained gardens that would hide screams and muffle gunshots. "Isn't it romantic?" Mary looked at the house where she was supposed to die and forced herself to smile. "It's perfect," she said, meaning something entirely different than William understood. As they walked toward the front door, Mary caught a glimpse of movement in the tree line, FBI agents taking their positions. Agent Martinez's voice whispered through her earpiece, "Game time. Remember, we're with you every step of the way." William unlocked the door and gestured for Mary to enter first. As she crossed the threshold, Mary realized she was walking into either her salvation or her tomb. Everything now depended on the next few hours, and whether the performance of her lifetime would be enough to keep her breathing until morning. Behind them, Vincent Moreau's sedan pulled into the driveway, and Mary knew the final act of William's plan was about to begin. The Hamptons house felt like a mausoleum as William closed and locked the front door behind them. Mary had always loved this place. The ocean view from every window, the wraparound porch where they'd spent summer evenings, the cozy fireplace where William had first told her he loved her. Now, every familiar detail felt ominous, transformed by the knowledge that William had chosen this sanctuary as the setting for her murder. "I'll start a fire," William said, moving toward the living room with practiced ease. "Why don't you open that bottle of champagne we've been saving? We have so much to celebrate." Mary nodded, though her hands shook as she retrieved the Dom Perignon from their wine refrigerator. Through the kitchen window, she could see Vincent Moreau's sedan parked at the edge of their property, waiting. Agent Martinez's voice whispered through her earpiece, "Moreau is maintaining position. Our units are in place. Keep William talking." The champagne cork popped with a sound that made Mary jump. She poured 2 glasses, wondering if this would be her last drink. The bubbles rose to the surface like tiny prayers, and Mary found herself thinking about the baby growing inside her, William's child, who would never know their father was a monster. "To us," William said, raising his glass as the fireplace crackled to life behind him. "To our future." "To our future," Mary echoed, the words tasting like ash. They settled onto the sofa facing the fire, and Mary tried to read William's timeline in his body language. He seemed relaxed but alert, a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Every casual gesture felt calculated, every loving smile like a countdown to violence. "Mary, there's something I need to tell you," William began, and Mary's blood turned to ice. This was it, the moment he would reveal his true intentions. "I know I've been distant lately, distracted by work, but everything I've done has been for us, for our future together." Mary forced herself to look interested rather than terrified. "What do you mean?" "The merger, the offshore accounts, all of it. I've been building something bigger than Harrison Tech, an empire that will set us up for life." William's eyes reflected the firelight as he spoke, making him look demonic. "But empires require sacrifices, difficult choices." Through her earpiece, Agent Martinez's voice was urgent. "He's building up to something, stay ready." "What kind of sacrifices?" Mary asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. William set down his champagne and moved closer to her on the sofa. "The kind that prove how much someone is willing to give up for the person they love." Mary's heart pounded so hard she was certain William could hear it. "I don't understand." "I think you do," William said softly, his hand reaching out to stroke her cheek. "I think you've understood for a while now." The touch that had once made her feel cherished now made her skin crawl. Mary forced herself not to flinch away. "William, you're scaring me." "You should be scared," he replied, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Because I know about the security cameras, Mary. I know you watched the video." Mary's world tilted. William knew, had known all along that she'd discovered his plan. The past 3 days hadn't been her successfully deceiving him. They'd been him playing with her like a cat with a mouse. "I don't know what you're talking about," Mary said, but her voice betrayed her terror. William smiled, the same charming expression that had won her heart 3 years ago. "The cameras I had repaired last week, they've been working fine for months. I had them fixed to show you exactly what I wanted you to see. Did you really think I would discuss murder plans in my own bedroom without knowing who might be listening?" Mary's mind reeled. The video that had seemed like such damning evidence was actually an elaborate setup. William had orchestrated her discovery of his affair and murder plot, had manipulated her into thinking she was one step ahead when she'd actually been dancing to his choreography all along. "But why?" Mary whispered. "Because this way is so much cleaner," William explained, his tone conversational. "A grieving widower whose wife discovered his affair and threatened exposure, a woman who became unstable, possibly suicidal, when she learned about his infidelity. Much more believable than a random robbery, don't you think?" Through her earpiece, Agent Martinez's voice was sharp. "Move away from him, now." But before Mary could react, William's hand closed around her wrist with crushing force. "And the FBI agents you've been working with? Detective Chen and Agent Martinez? They're not who you think they are." Mary's blood turned to ice. "What?" "Vincent Moreau is very thorough in his planning. He arranged for you to meet people you'd trust, people who would make you feel safe while actually walking you directly into my trap." William's grip tightened, and Mary gasped in pain. "Did you really think the NYPD would assign a detective to investigate me based on nothing but a suspicious wife's paranoia?" The room seemed to spin around Mary as the full scope of William's manipulation became clear. The coffee shop meeting, the hotel room, the FBI surveillance, all of it had been theater designed to make her compliant. She had been completely alone this entire time, surrounded by William's accomplices, while believing she was protected by law enforcement. "The wire you're wearing is transmitting to Vincent's team, not the FBI," William continued almost gently. "We've been listening to every word, watching you play your part perfectly. You've been so brave, Mary, so determined to catch the big bad husband who wanted to kill you." Mary tried to pull away, but William's grip was unbreakable. "You're insane." "I'm practical," William corrected. "You were becoming a liability, too curious about my business dealings, too interested in playing the perfect wife instead of staying quietly in the background. And when Vincent's investigation revealed you were asking questions about our offshore accounts, well, it became clear that our marriage had reached its expiration date." Through the wire that Mary now realized was feeding information to her killers rather than her protectors, she could hear Vincent Moreau's voice. "It's time." Make it look convincing. William released her wrist and stood, moving to the fireplace where a poker rested against the stone hearth. The metal gleamed in the firelight, and Mary realized this was how William planned to kill her, beaten to death in their romantic beach house, another victim of domestic violence. "I did love you in my way," William said, testing the weight of the poker in his hands. "But business is business, and you became bad for business." Mary scrambled backward on the sofa, her mind racing for escape routes. The front door was locked, the nearest neighbors were miles away, and the ocean behind the house offered no refuge. She was trapped in her own personal nightmare, with no cavalry coming to save her. But as William raised the poker above his head, Mary realized something that gave her a desperate surge of hope. If she was going to die, she would make sure William paid the price. Her phone was still recording everything through the FBI app Agent Martinez had installed, the real Agent Martinez, who Mary prayed actually existed somewhere in the darkness outside. "William, wait," Mary said, her voice steadying with newfound resolve. "Before you kill me, don't you want to know about the baby?" William paused, the poker still raised threateningly above her. "What baby?" Mary smiled, and for the first time in days, the expression felt genuine. "Your baby, the one I'm carrying. The one who will be orphaned when the real FBI bursts through that door in about 30 seconds. William's face went white as the sound of shattering glass filled the room. Real FBI agents, not Vincent Moreau's imposters, poured through the windows like an avenging tide, their weapons trained on William as he stood frozen with the poker in his hands. "Drop the weapon," Agent Martinez, the real Agent Martinez, shouted as she kicked in the front door. "FBI, get on the ground now." Mary had never heard a more beautiful sound than those 3 letters echoing through the room where she was supposed to die. As William dropped the poker and raised his hands in surrender, Mary realized that sometimes the most important performance of your life was knowing when to stop pretending and start fighting back. The hunted had become the hunter after all, and William Harrison's empire of lies was about to come crashing down around him. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of emergency vehicles, crime scene investigators, and federal agents transforming the Hamptons house into a command center. Mary sat wrapped in a blanket on the back porch, watching the sunrise she'd thought she would never see while Agent Martinez, the real one, explained how close she'd come to dying. "Vincent Moreau is a professional," Agent Martinez said, settling into the wicker chair beside Mary. "He's been running this kind of elaborate deception for years, targeting wealthy individuals whose deaths would financially benefit their spouses. Your husband hired the best." Mary stared out at the ocean, trying to process the magnitude of the conspiracy that had nearly killed her. "How did you find me? The real you, I mean." "Your sister called the Portland FBI field office 2 days ago. She was worried because you hadn't returned her calls, which was apparently unusual for you. When we traced your phone records and saw calls to numbers associated with known criminals, we realized something was very wrong." Mary's sister Jessica, 3,000 miles away in Oregon, had inadvertently saved her life by being a concerned sibling. The irony wasn't lost on Mary that the family William had systematically isolated her from had ultimately been her salvation. The fake Detective Chen and Agent Martinez, where are they now? In federal custody along with Vincent Moreau and Elena Vasquez. The entire Meridian consulting operation is being dismantled as we speak. Agent Martinez consulted her notes. "We've identified at least 12 other cases where they've successfully carried out murders for hire, all made to look like accidents or domestic violence situations." Mary shuddered, thinking of other women who hadn't been as fortunate as she was. "And William?" "Charged with conspiracy to commit murder, wire fraud, money laundering, and about 15 other federal crimes. With the evidence we've gathered, including the recordings from your phone and the financial transfers, he's looking at life in prison without parole." The news should have brought Mary satisfaction, but instead she felt hollow. The man she'd loved and married was a stranger, a sophisticated predator who had selected her as a victim from the moment they met. 3 years of her life had been built on a foundation of lies so elaborate that she was still discovering their scope. "Mrs. Williams," Agent Martinez continued gently, "there's something else you need to know. The pregnancy that William and his associates knew about, they discovered it through your medical records. William had been having you monitored by private investigators for months, tracking your movements, recording your conversations, documenting everything you did." Mary's hand moved instinctively to her still flat stomach. Even her pregnancy, the most private and precious secret she'd ever carried, had been violated by William's surveillance network. How long was he planning this? According to the financial records we've seized, William started moving assets offshore 18 months ago, right around the time he began his relationship with Elena Vasquez. The planning for your murder began at least 6 months ago, when the Henderson Industries merger was first proposed. Mary tried to reconcile this timeline with her memories of their marriage. 6 months ago, William had suggested they take a second honeymoon to celebrate their anniversary. He'd been especially attentive and romantic, making love to her with passionate intensity that had made her feel like the luckiest woman alive. Now she realized he'd been fucking her while planning her death, playing the devoted husband, while calculating the best method to eliminate her. "There's more," Agent Martinez said, her tone becoming even more gentle. "We found evidence that you weren't William's first wife to be targeted. His first marriage ended when his wife died, in what was ruled an accidental drowning. We're reopening that case." The revelation hit Mary like a physical blow. William was a serial killer who specialized in murdering his wives. She hadn't been chosen randomly. She'd been selected as his next victim from the moment he'd set his sights on her at that charity gala 3 years ago. "How many others?" Mary whispered. "We don't know yet, but we're investigating every significant relationship William has had over the past decade. You may have helped us prevent other murders that were already in the planning stages." As the morning progressed, Mary found herself at the center of a media storm that rivaled anything she could have imagined. News vans lined the road leading to their property, and helicopter reporters circled overhead like mechanical vultures. The story had everything the media loved: a billionaire tech mogul, an elaborate murder plot, international conspiracies, and a wife who had survived by her own cunning and courage. Detective Sarah Chen arrived mid-morning, not the imposter who had been part of Vincent Moreau's team, but a real NYPD detective who had been assigned to coordinate with the federal investigation. She was younger than the fake Chen, with kind eyes and an air of competence that made Mary feel safe for the first time in days. "I know this is overwhelming," Detective Chen said, as they sat together in the living room where William had planned to kill her. "But we need to prepare you for what comes next. This case is going to trial and you'll be the star witness." Mary nodded, though the thought of facing William in court made her stomach churn. "What do I need to do?" "Tell the truth. Your testimony about discovering the security footage, the manipulation you endured, and the final confrontation here will be crucial to securing convictions for everyone involved." Detective Chen paused. "But Mary, you should know that William's defense team will try to discredit you. They'll claim you were an unstable wife seeking revenge for his affair, that you fabricated evidence or misunderstood conversations. The prospect of having her credibility attacked in public, of having her marriage dissected by hostile lawyers, was almost as terrifying as the murder plot itself." But Mary thought about the other victims, the women who hadn't survived their husband's greed, and the future victims who might be saved by dismantling this network. "I'll do whatever it takes," Mary said firmly. Over the following weeks, Mary's life became a careful balance of legal preparation and personal reconstruction. She moved out of the Manhattan penthouse into a secure FBI safe house, unable to return to the home where she'd lived with a man who'd been planning her death. Everything she'd owned was now evidence in a federal investigation. The ultrasound photos she'd never gotten to share with William became exhibits in a murder conspiracy case. The romantic dinners and loving gestures she'd treasured were reframed as a predator's manipulation tactics. Her entire marriage was being methodically deconstructed by teams of lawyers and investigators. But in the quiet moments between depositions and evidence reviews, Mary began to discover who she was without William's influence. For the first time in 3 years, she could make decisions without considering his preferences, could speak to friends and family without his subtle disapproval, could simply exist without performing the role of the perfect wife. 6 months later, Mary stood on the courthouse steps in Lower Manhattan, facing a wall of reporters and camera crews that seemed to stretch for blocks. The media had dubbed it the Black Widow trial, though Mary found bitter irony in the nickname. She was the victim, not the predator. Yet somehow the narrative had twisted to make her the dangerous spider in the web. "Mrs. Williams, how do you feel about testifying against your husband today?" called out a reporter from CNN. Mary had prepared for this moment with the FBI's media relations team, but the reality of public scrutiny was more intense than any training could have conveyed. She wore a simple navy dress and minimal jewelry, everything calculated to project trustworthiness and vulnerability rather than the wealth that had made her a target. "I feel ready to tell the truth," Mary replied, her voice steady despite the cameras clicking around her like mechanical insects. "My husband and his associates plan to murder me for financial gain. The jury deserves to hear exactly how sophisticated and calculated their conspiracy was." Inside the federal courthouse, Mary took her place in the witness box and looked across the courtroom at William for the first time since that night in the Hamptons. He sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, looking every inch the successful businessman rather than the cold-blooded killer she knew him to be. His lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Margaret Stern, had built his defense around painting Mary as an unstable, vindictive wife seeking revenge for his affair. "Mrs. Williams," Stern began during cross-examination, her tone dripping with disdain, "isn't it true that you had been suspicious of your husband's fidelity for months before this alleged plot was discovered?" Mary had rehearsed this moment with federal prosecutors dozens of times. "No, that's not true. I had no reason to suspect William was having an affair until I saw the security footage. But you admit you were going through his personal belongings, checking his computer, monitoring his movements, classic signs of a paranoid, jealous wife." "I was checking the security system that my husband had asked me to monitor while it was being repaired. I wasn't snooping. I was doing what he'd requested." Stern smiled coldly. "How convenient. And this alleged murder plot, detailed discussions between your husband and his supposed mistress, happened to be captured on video just when you were watching." Mary felt the weight of the jury's attention, saw the skepticism in some of their faces. This was the moment that would determine whether William spent his life in prison or returned to his penthouse a free man. "The conversations were real," Mary said firmly. "Your client discussed my death as casually as planning a business meeting. He transferred $5 million to professional killers. He manipulated me into believing I was being protected by federal agents when I was actually being led to my execution." "Allegedly," Stern corrected. "You have no proof that my client intended actual harm. Couldn't these conversations have been role-playing? Fantasy scenarios between lovers?" Mary looked directly at William, seeing him clearly for the first time since their wedding day. He wasn't the charming, successful man she'd fallen in love with. He was a predator who had selected her for murder with the same clinical precision he applied to business deals. "Your client beat his first wife to death and made it look like a drowning," Mary said, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. "He's not a romantic fantasist. He's a serial killer who specializes in murdering women who trust him." The prosecution had done their job well. Over 3 weeks of testimony, they presented a case so comprehensive and damning that even Margaret Stern's skillful manipulation couldn't obscure the truth. Financial records showing William's systematic theft from his own company. Communication intercepts between Vincent Moreau and his assassination team. Testimony from other victims' families who had never received justice until now. When the jury returned after 18 hours of deliberation, Mary sat in the gallery surrounded by FBI agents who had become her closest companions over the past year. She watched William's face as the foreman read the verdict, guilty on all 37 counts, including first-degree murder conspiracy, racketeering, and wire fraud. William showed no emotion as the judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He didn't look at Mary as he was led away in shackles, didn't acknowledge the woman whose life he'd tried to steal for the price of a merger deal, but Mary felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a profound sadness for the time she'd lost and the innocence that could never be recovered. 1 year after William's conviction, Mary Williams, now using her maiden name, Mary Chen, stood in the nursery of her small apartment in Portland, Oregon, watching her 6-month-old daughter sleep peacefully in her crib. Little Sarah had William's blue eyes but Mary's stubborn chin, and she was the most beautiful thing Mary had ever created. The decision to keep the baby had been the hardest of Mary's life. William's child would forever carry the DNA of a murderer, but she would also carry Mary's strength, her grandmother's kindness, and the love of the extended family who had embraced them both without question. "She's perfect," Mary's sister Jessica said softly from the doorway, "and she's going to grow up knowing her mother is the strongest woman alive." Mary smiled, though tears still came easily when she thought about everything Sarah would never have. A father who loved her, a normal family story, the privilege and opportunities that William's wealth might have provided. Instead, Sarah would have something more valuable, a mother who had survived the worst betrayal imaginable and chosen life over revenge, hope over hatred. The book deal had surprised everyone. Surviving the Perfect Husband, a true story of love, lies, and murder, had spent 6 months on the New York Times bestseller list, and the advance had provided enough money for Mary to start over anywhere she chose. She'd chosen home, the Pacific Northwest where she'd grown up, where people valued authenticity over appearances, and where Sarah could grow up surrounded by genuine love. The movie rights had gone to a major studio, with plans for a thriller starring a Hollywood A-lister as Mary. The irony wasn't lost on her. William had wanted to make her disappear, but instead he'd made her famous. Her story had inspired other women to leave dangerous relationships, had changed laws about domestic surveillance, and had exposed a network of killers who had been operating for decades. Detective Sarah Chen, the real one who had become a close friend during the investigation, visited regularly. She'd been promoted to lieutenant, partly based on her work on Mary's case, and she'd started a task force dedicated to investigating suspicious deaths among wealthy spouses. "We've identified 17 more potential victims," Chen reported during her most recent visit. "Wives and husbands who died in accidents that became much more suspicious once we knew what to look for. Your case broke open an entire industry of murder for hire." Mary bounced baby Sarah gently as they talked, marveling at how completely her perspective on everything had changed. A year ago, she'd measured success by the thread count of her sheets and the exclusivity of her social invitations. Now, success meant Sarah's first laugh, a peaceful night's sleep, and the simple knowledge that she was safe. The trauma hadn't disappeared. Mary still woke sometimes in the middle of the night, convinced she could hear William's voice in the hallway. She still jumped at unexpected sounds and checked her locks compulsively. But she'd learned that survival wasn't about overcoming fear. It was about moving forward, despite it. "I've been thinking about going back to work," Mary told Jessica over dinner that evening. "Maybe starting a non-profit for women leaving dangerous relationships, something that could help other people the way the FBI helped me." "You sure you're ready for that?" Jessica asked. "Sarah's still so young and you've been through so much." "I'm ready," Mary interrupted gently. "I spent 3 years of my life being William's victim. I won't spend the rest of it being a victim of my own fear." As autumn settled over Portland, Mary began laying the groundwork for the Mary Chen Foundation, designed to provide resources, safe housing, and legal support for women escaping domestic violence. The work was challenging and emotionally draining, but it gave Mary's survival story a purpose beyond her own healing. Vincent Moreau had been extradited to face charges in 4 different countries where Meridian Consulting had operated. Elena Vasquez had accepted a plea bargain in exchange for testimony against other members of the network. The fake Detective Chen and Agent Martinez were serving 20-year sentences for conspiracy and fraud. William remained in federal prison, where Mary was told he spent his time in the library, still trying to find legal loopholes that might win him an appeal. She didn't think about him often anymore. He had taken enough of her life already. On the first anniversary of William's conviction, Mary received an unexpected letter. It was from Catherine Harrison, William's first wife's sister, thanking Mary for giving her family the closure they'd never thought possible. "Knowing that Rebecca's death wasn't an accident, that someone finally believed she was murdered, has meant everything to our family," Catherine wrote. "You gave my sister justice, and you prevented other women from suffering her fate. Rebecca would have loved you for your courage." Mary kept the letter in Sarah's baby book, next to the ultrasound photos that had once been evidence in a murder trial. Someday, when Sarah was old enough to understand, Mary would tell her the full story, how she'd almost been orphaned before she was born, how her mother had fought back against impossible odds, how love and truth had ultimately triumphed over greed and deception. But for now it was enough to hold her daughter close and watch the sunset paint the Portland sky in shades of gold and pink. Mary had learned that survival wasn't about returning to who you were before trauma struck. It was about becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone who could face whatever came next. As Sarah cooed softly in her arms, Mary realized she had everything she'd ever really wanted. A family built on truth, a future full of possibilities, and the unshakable knowledge that she had the strength to protect the people she loved, the woman who had once been Mrs. William Harrison was gone forever, but Mary Chen, survivor, mother, advocate, was just beginning her real life. Outside, the city lights twinkled like fallen stars, and Mary felt something she hadn't experienced in years, complete and perfect peace. She had forgotten to tell her billionaire husband that the camera was working again, and that simple oversight had saved not just her life, but the lives of countless other women who would never have to face the terror she'd survived. The truth had set her free, And freedom, Mary had learned, was worth more than all of William's billions combined.